Hello, my friend. Welcome to today's podcast episode. Today, I'm going to be talking about getting back or realigning yourself for a fall fitness and nutrition wellness routine. I just want to say that typically I would love for putting out this type of content in September, but for whatever reason, and I think one of the reasons of me not really feeling like I was in a good routine yet, I just hadn't uploaded it. I have done a podcast episode on this before. I thought about re-uploading it again, but as I listened to it, I was like, they need something similar. I'm going to give some of the same tips, but I've got some new tips for you guys. So I am going to be structuring this episode as getting into a routine that works for you. We're going to talk about workouts. We're going to talk about nutrition. And then at the end, I've got a couple random hodgepodge hot tips for you. So let's dive into it. Welcome to Living in Sync. This is a wellness and lifestyle podcast for ladies in their 30s. We've got a lot going on, and on this show, we're going to talk about it all. I'm your host, Joelle. If you're into health, wellness, fitness, beauty, fashion, business, career, time management hacks, organization, girl chats, goal setting, mom things, and everything in between, I hope this show supports you in whatever you need today. Let's dig into today's episode. Okay, so getting into your fall wellness, fitness, routine, nutrition, whatever it is you're wanting to focus on, you guys know whenever I create some type of episode like this, whether it be time management or getting into or sharing some sort of routines for you, I always start out by saying, be realistic about your routines with the season of life that you are in. If you're a mom of newborns and toddlers, take into account that season and what you should be prioritizing, which is, in my opinion, sleep. Well, in almost any season of life, my hopes and the ideal would be prioritizing sleep because it does impact everything from cravings to how your body recovers from your workouts, and how your body recovers from workouts determines the results you're going to get. So sleep should always be prioritized, side caveat. But, if you have kids in school that are doing evening activities, because sometimes we can romanticize the next season of life. I know I did that a lot when my kids were little, where I'm like, it's going to be so much easier to do ABC when XYZ is happening, and then I'll get to that. Then I'll start doing things in this way. But really taking account of what your typical day-to-day rhythm and routine is and making it work for you. And I'll give an example of like how I did this in the past. So in the past, I always thought I had to get up and work out like right away in the morning. And I started to do that after I had my first. It's like his 6-week appointment. My 6-week checkup happened, and I jumped right back into trying to get in early morning workouts. And I fought that. And I would say when he was about 1, we moved into our new house, and one day I slept in and I woke up frazzled. I was like, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And then I was like, well, why don't you just go on a walk today? And then during nap time, drink your pre-workout before I'm, because like when you're in that season, I'm sure all of us moms can remember. But when I would be putting him down for nap, I would then get my workout in. Now, obviously, if I had to go to work at a 9 to 5, this is also going to be different for you. But I know one of my social media friends, Courtney, she's a mom of 2, and she works a corporate job. She's always tried to prioritize working out on the weekends and on lunch breaks. So that's why I'm just saying, no matter what you see somebody else doing, maybe you see somebody else on social media getting it done early in the morning, but that just truly doesn't work for your season of life. That is a-okay to sit down and think about, what is your season of life? What's going on? What should you be focusing on? And make the best plan for you, because there's no right time to work out. There's no right way to do things. What you want to find is the right thing for you that's going to work for your season of life, and be realistic about it. Okay. So let's get into talking about workouts specifically. So when thinking about what it is you want to be doing for your workouts, I want you to think about what it is that you want to focus on, and or what's best for your schedule. And I'm going to cover those two things, because movement is so beneficial mentally, physically, emotionally, for stress. And that's what I want you to start seeing the benefits of. So when I ask the question, the first part of the question, what do you want to focus on? Is there a weakness or something that you're struggling with that's kind of impacting or affecting your day-to-day? Now, my friends, let's try to stop saying, I want to work out to lose weight. Well, I want my workouts to help me lose weight. That can be a goal for you, but I want you to get more granular than that. I want you to start thinking differently than that. When it comes to like, what is your goal with working out? If you're like, I remember for a while, I had the goal of getting my cardiovascular back up again, because when my, at the time, 4 or 5-year-old was like, Mom, chase me, I couldn't chase him worth a darn. So I did have a time where cardio was prioritized. I know there's a lot of people who should be focusing actually on flexibility and mobility because they feel so achy and stiff. Strength training is a really great thing to work on. And especially for, let's just use this example. There's always a half marathon, 10K, big like running event in the springtime of where we live. And I'm really thinking about like, I may want to try and challenge myself in that way. But on this front end of fall, I'm focusing on strength training. So actually a couple of my neighbors have been coming over and working out in the morning with me. And we were kind of doing a hodgepodge of different workouts for the last 3 weeks. But then I was like, well, let's give a program a try and start having some metrics and measurements and goals. And, it's not like every morning at 5:30, I'm trying to figure out what workout we should be doing and hoping that I pick a good one that everybody likes. We decided to start the program Lift 4, and that's lifting, interval training at the end, and abs. And it's 4 days a week. It works really well for our schedule, and we're going to try that out. And I can definitely see how, as we do this together, on the exercises where we're using certain pound of dumbbells, we can say and see like, hey, let's challenge ourselves. Last time we used whatever pound weight, let's up it and try this weight for a couple sets or something like that, and set those milestones of progress. So if you haven't thought about it in this way, you really have to detach the goal of weight loss and workouts. They are no longer correlated with one another in your brain. That's what I want to see you detach. I want to have you in your mind like, my workouts are not for weight loss. Actually, she talks about this in the program To Be Mindset as workouts are extra credit. When it comes to weight loss, it needs to come on a sole focus of nutrition. Nutrition is what's going to be the thing that moves the needle on weight. And so when you take that out of the equation, and I then impose the question once again, what do you want to focus on? Do you want to get stronger? Do you want to move more freely without aches and pains? Do you want to feel just how do you want to feel, or what do you want to focus on? Or what is something that feels like a limitation that you can improve upon? That is where you find your focus in your fitness. And it might be, because this was mine for a long time, I want to be well-rounded. So I had incorporated like, okay, I'm going to do 3 days of strength training, 1 day of steady state cardio, 1 day of intervals or like high intensity cardio, and then Pilates, yoga, whatever. Like I wanted to have more of that well-roundedness. So I set up a structure where it covered all of those things, right? So that is what I mean by that question. The second part of this same question is what's best for your schedule and what's realistic for your season, is more thinking about the time that you have in a singular day, or how many days a week is going to work best for you. Because you can split this up in different ways. Is it better for you to do 30 minutes of working out every single day? Or are you like, oh, I would love to do 3-4 days of longer workouts, really push myself, and then have those other days of recovery. Maybe you're just like taking a walk. Or, there's even a program called Job One or other, 20-minute workouts that you can find on YouTube where you're doing 20 minutes a day. You're going in with like intensity and fierceness, but you know that it's a short amount of time. And all of those, I know people who do these really short burst total body workouts very consistently, and they feel and look amazing. I also know the likewise, where people do longer workouts and they're maybe focused only on 1 or 2 muscle groups, and they really fatigue that one muscle group, and the next day they work on a different muscle group. And it really just depends on what your goal is and what's going to be realistic for your season. Okay. And if you are somebody who's like, I'm getting back into this, remember, start slow and progress over time. That's going to continue to help you optimize moving forward instead of feeling completely defeated, completely burnt out. And how can you ever get from A to Z? Remember, it's just A, B. So if you haven't been working out at all and you're just going to start with a 15-minute walk and 5 minutes with some hand weights, that is A-okay, and that is so good. But know that there's always forward progress. So maybe you get into that routine and you keep the 15-minute walk and you do 10 minutes of weights. Just start with where you're at and incrementally start over time. With some of the strength training exercises, if you need to use cans of soup and then move up and move up and move up, there's so much room for growth and especially if you're new to something like strength training, you're going to see a lot of quick gains. Especially with the friends that I'm working out with, I anticipate them seeing some pretty fast gains because I think they're relatively new to weight training. Me, I've been weight training a long time. I've been doing curls with 10s, 15s, and 12s for a long time. So it's actually going to be harder for me to see that type of progress and forward movement than it will be for them. And I'm just really excited to see where we kind of go with following this program. And that leads me literally right into what progress points are you going to measure? And I challenge you to not just use the scale. Yes, the scale can be a really great tool. And if you do have that goal of weight loss and you want to use the scale because you want to see the scale go down, once again, I'm going to take a page from Alana Molstein's book and say, to lose 10 pounds, that's losing 2 pounds 5 times. So just focus on stepping on the scale. What's 2 pounds less than that? Get to that goal. When you get to that goal, focus on the next 2 pounds down, then focus on the next 2 pounds down, then focus on the next 2 pounds down. But I don't want that to be the only thing you're tracking and the only thing you're measuring. I've given the example of, if you find yourself doing workouts and you're only using your 5 or 10 pound dumbbell, what if you just tried for a few reps or for one set to go a little bit heavier? Or to instead do a couple more reps, and really get yourself to that failure. If it's something like a cardio goal, tracking your distance. And even if you're oh, I don't have one of those fancy things where I can track my miles or whatever, go by songs. If you can only jog for one song now, work yourself up to, okay, I'm going to get through a song and a half. I'm going to get through 2 songs. Oh, now I'm going to try. Now I have the goal of trying to get through 3 songs at a good jogging pace or whatever. And see if you can find different ways to progress and measure just outside of the scale and have something tangible. How many push-ups can you do right now? I mean, I see so many amazing and incredible women that set a goal of a certain number of push-ups on their toes with good form. And over time, it's like, oh, I got up to doing 1. Now I'm going to try to do 2. Now I'm going to try to do 3. And that is a simple way to really prove to yourself, like, I'm getting stronger. I remember when I was doing my first weight training program, I started in health and fitness doing a lot of like the cardio routines that we saw like the aerobics ladies doing. And then I went off to college and I was just run. I'd be on the elliptical for so long. Then I got into Turbo Jam and Turbo Fire. And because I fell in love with Chalene Johnson, I did her weight training program, Chalene Extreme. And I remember being like, by the end of this program, which was 3 months long, I want to do push-ups on my toes. And I remember that feeling of like working up to them. I could not do push-ups on my toes at the beginning of that program, but with her encouragement and over time, and even now I'm working back to doing push-ups on my toes, and it's a really great way to track your progress and to be like, wow, when I started this, I couldn't even do 1 push-up on my toes. Now I started with getting good at push-ups on my knees. And then I thought, oh, why don't I just try 1 on my toes? And that might sound so silly for those of you who have been working out for a long time and you can like get down on the ground and knock out 10, 20 push-ups, whatever. But just remember, we all start somewhere, and it's really important to acknowledge where you're at and set those pinpoints of progress where you're like, I did that. I can do that now. Like, I couldn't do that, whatever, whatnot, what have you. And now I can, right? And I think for me, like come spring, I'm going to be saying that when it comes to like running in miles, because right now, like I think I can barely do 3 miles without dying. And I would love to get back to a point where it's like a 3-mile jog just feels like, oh, yep, I can go do that. It's not that much of a challenge for me. But right now, definitely a huge challenge. So now I'm focusing on strength training. We do have some HIIT intervals within that. And I'm still doing a really good job with walking. And I really encourage walking a lot. I know everybody and their mother is talking about the benefits of walking right now. So I will just breeze by that, but I will put emphasis on like walk. If you can take a 10-minute walk, go and do that. If you can take a nice long walk, man, I've been noticing, especially when I kind of quote unquote force myself, because with walking, a lot of times I'm like, I start out on my walk and I'm like, I really don't want to do this. I'll just go up to this spot, turn around and come back. But when I quote unquote force myself to do a long walk, man, I have noticed some huge mental health benefits from long walks with music. Sometimes I'll go to an uplifting podcast, but most of the time it's with music or chatting with a friend, whatever. And that's been really helpful. Okay, moving on from working out. Nutrition, 'tis the season for comfort food. And I actually had this thought this morning, and so I wanted to share it today because for me, working out consistently is not the hard part. I will flat out say, even as a certified nutritionist, even as somebody who gets nutrition nerdy about that, for a lot of years now, I've struggled with overeating and thinking that I'm not eating a lot, but actually when it boils down to it, I know I've for years have been just eating too much. I'm a small person. I have a quote unquote sedentary job. It wasn't up until recently where I've been focusing on getting good long walks in and movement and paying attention to step count and things. And I was just eating too much. And I was thinking about it this morning as I was making my breakfast, and I had yogurt, granola, berries, and 3 of my favorite Applegate chicken maple sausages. They're so good. We've bought them for years and years and years. And as I was thinking about it, I had the thought of how you fuel. How you fuel will reflect how you feel. How you fuel will reflect how you feel. And I know I already talked about this of like workouts being extra credit in the scope of weight loss. Truly, if you have a goal of weight loss, nutrition being the sole focus is so important for you to pay attention to, because you cannot, I know it's been said, but you cannot out-exercise a bad diet. So how you fuel will reflect how you feel. And I know for me, my energy, my mood, my emotion is so priority to me right now. And now understanding that even how I fuel myself with foods will affect those things, I'm just carrying that mantra with me today. And maybe it'll come with me tomorrow, but it just felt really right to share with you guys today. But how you fuel will affect how you feel. And I wanted to talk once again about my thirds method, because the people who I coached through this thirds method still use it to this day, still say it's beneficial, still say it has helped them, really kind of reevaluate and get on a good routine for themselves on what to eat, how to eat, why, and all of that. And not feeling like you're completely depriving yourself of everything is thinking about the thirds method. And I've done a podcast episode on this before, so I'm just going to reiterate. The thirds method is thinking of your day in the scope of 3 blocks or 3 chunks. So you've got morning to lunch, lunch to dinner, dinner to bedtime. And my thirds method is get in a good routine with the first third of the day. And then when you're in a good routine with the first third of the day, then go into being in a good routine that works for you in the second third of the day. Okay, usually people can get the grips of the first third of the day pretty quickly. So a lot of times this is a matter of like 4 days to a week, and a client told me, I'm ready to tackle the second third of the day. For most, it tends to be that third of the day that's the most challenging. So what I mean by that is focus on the first third of the day. For the first third of the day, focus on waking up, having some water, and eating a well-rounded, high-protein meal and more water, and then get yourself to lunch. And only focus from a nutrition standpoint on that first third of the day. Like I said, this is mostly pretty easy peasy. The second third of the day, depending on what you do and how your days go, the second third of the day from lunch to dinner time can feel a little bit more tricky. So for me, it's been quite easier because I work from home, so I have access to a lot with my fridge. That makes it easier and also makes it more of a challenge, which I'll talk about. But for me, it's like, lunch, and I've got a system for lunch, especially in the fall and winter. Like, it is way easier for me to like quickly fuel myself lunch. And then for me, I noticed a huge sticking point that would derail me was around 3:30. And now I'm solely focusing on getting through the second third of the day. So I know my sticking point of like really when I start to overeat and overconsume and have the extra foods that I do not need, but I am just in the kitchen snacking, is that 3:30 time period. And now I'm trying to do things like make my shake at that time, or make like a well-rounded snack plate where there's protein, fruits and veggies. Like it kind of feels like a mini meal. So for me, I'm trying to do kind of 4 meals throughout the day. So one before I start work, one around when I feel like I need a lunch break, another one at around the 3:30 mark. And then by dinner time, if I do that, then I still have dinner, obviously, with my family. But I notice that I can have a much smaller portion because I fueled myself well in the first 2/3 of the day. If I leave all of my eating for the latter half of the day, that's when I get snacky. That's when I start like just shoveling things into my mouth. And I'm like, I probably unconsciously ate around 400 calories. And an extra 400 calories on a petite person, that adds up over time to weight gain. So I truly have had to have a real talk conversation with myself, you guys, about, no, Joelle, like you say you don't know why this weight has been packing on. But when I look at what I'm eating and the habits and the little extras that I've been consuming, it's no wonder why I've seen progressive weight gain. And I'm putting into practice that 2 pounds at a time too. My workouts, they're not a part of my weight loss plan. They're a part of my strength plan. They're a part of my mental health plan, but they're not a part of my weight loss plan. It's solely focusing on nourishing myself. And then, the second half of the evening, or the latter half of the day, from dinner time to evening, if you're somebody where you're like, okay, I am a nighttime snacker, what kind of solutions can you start implementing for yourself that would be beneficial in getting ahead and knowing that? I used to teach on a if this then that situation. So there were a couple of times where I'm like, if I'm craving something like voluminous, salty, sweet, like I want to have just handfuls and handfuls of chips or something like that. Now I'll say like, okay, I'm going to have the tortilla chips that I like. The dip I'm going to dip it in is my salsa and Greek yogurt dip. So I'm also getting more protein and more full than just eating chips on their own. If you're like, oh, I've got a sweet tooth at the end of the evening, do you have access to something like a Ninja Creamy, or is there just some kind of thing that you can do, or, yogurt and fruit before bed? I actually don't recommend eating before bed for me personally. If I eat before bed, and even like I've noticed this with my kids too, if they eat before bed, sleep isn't as good and I wake up hungrier in the morning. So it's really time to start paying attention to your body and how it responds. But I did work with a nutritionist one time that highly recommended eating before bed. So not everybody's the same. But what has been working really well for me is like 4, I wouldn't say they're small meals, like 4 mid-sized meals throughout the day, one for breakfast, lunchtime, that 3:30 time, and then dinner with my family. And that leads to feeling really fueled. I'm not even thinking about food before bed or whatnot. What else? I talked about the thirds methods. Oh, so with it being fall and it being the season of comfort food, reminder of like soups and stews are so healthy, filling, and nourishing, and so good for those like comfort foods, like wanting, especially when the weather starts getting cold. These are so good to make. I make a soup every single week and have it for lunch. And even last week when I was feeling under the weather, man, I was so grateful for when I made my beef stew, because it was just so comforting and nourishing. It's full of protein and vegetables. Crock pot meals are really great in the fall. Sheet pan meals. Just try not to overcomplicate it, but have well-rounded meals with protein and produce. I am a huge fan of protein and produce, like steak, potatoes, green beans, dinner time, boom. When it's a meal like that, oftentimes for my kids, I'll either do some type of like garlic bread or a grilled cheese, and that's what they get with the meal, because I know that they'll maybe not like the potatoes and green beans as much, so I give them like a grilled cheese with it. And so we're really eating the same things, but I'll throw like a few other things for the kids when it comes to something like that. Or, I'll pop in chicken nuggets in the air fryer for them and various things, because my kids aren't huge fans of like hot dishes and soups and things like that. But over time, I know they'll come around to it once I do that. So just don't overcomplicate it. Keep it really simple, and also have a focus. So for example, and this, you hear people say this on social media a lot, or maybe I do because I'm in a lot of in the algorithms of fitness influencer culture. But a lot of ladies will say like they changed their focus to how much protein they were having and how much protein they were getting, and that caused like a big difference in, and I don't want to say like a big difference in their body composition, because we just had a whole conversation about like detach your workouts. Well, this is in the scope of nutrition. So I guess like when ladies change their scope of, I'm going to pay attention to how much protein I'm getting. And if you aim for around that 20 to 30 grams of protein, I've seen ladies even say like, oh, I had a high protein breakfast. I had 2 eggs. Well, 2 eggs only has around 18 grams of protein in it. And that is a good amount. It's better than not having those 2 eggs, but still there's room for more, especially if you're trying to aim for around 20 to 30 grams of protein for each meal. When ladies look at it and they're like, oh, I had this like chicken Caesar wrap and it was actually only 12 grams of protein and a crazy amount of fat, and your then goal and your sole focus is to add double chicken or something like that, you start feeling more satisfied and you stay fuller longer and your body burns more calories processing and digesting protein than it does any other macronutrient. So the more protein you eat, the higher your BMR goes just by eating more protein. And ladies see and feel significant changes by just changing the lens and the scope of like, oh, I'm not necessarily focused on counting all my calories or hitting all of my macros, but I'm just paying attention to how much protein am I getting. When you have that awareness of like, oh my gosh, I'm only really getting around 12 grams. Well, I'm going to add, instead of just I'll use my own breakfast as an example this morning. So the yogurt that I get is 14 grams of protein, and that's a good amount on its own. But I pair it with my chicken sausages, which is probably around 14 grams as well. And that bumped it up from 14 to 28 grams of protein. That 28 grams of protein is really going to sustain me a lot longer than if I just had the yogurt, granola, and berries, right? Adding that chicken sausage didn't add a whole lot of extra calories, but it did add a good amount of more protein, which will sustain me longer. And just like if I would have just had the chicken sausage, berries, and instead of yogurt, I would have done like a toast, I would have had around 12 grams of protein. And toast and berries is fine and dandy, but when you change that sole focus of looking at how much protein is in this meal and you're focused on that, it tends to balance itself out more because, like I said, protein keeps you fuller longer. Your body has to work harder to digest and process protein. And so your BMR is going up a little bit just by consuming more protein. And you'll notice like hair, skin, nails, just everything will feel so good if your choice is to up the protein. Once I get people into that goal of eating enough protein, the next thing we focus on is fiber. So if you feel like you kind of are already at that sweet spot with protein, I want you to start tracking fiber and not paying attention necessarily to calories. That's not me saying calories aren't important, because they are when it comes to what you eat. Even if you're overeating a lot of healthy foods, you can still see weight gain because there's an excess of energy, and that's going to be stored as body fat. Okay. So I think I've hit it very, very simply of like, keep it really simple. Try to put on a different lens when it comes to nutrition. And now I just got a couple other things, just wellnessy stuff for your routines. Is in the fall and winter, hydrate your skin. Still try to do your best with drinking your water. Maybe instead of having your Stanley filled of ice water because it's chillier, maybe just start having like more of a room temperature water if that feels better, but don't skimp on hydration. And I mean that for internally and externally. I'm going to have a skincare episode coming next week where I go into more details on this. But in the fall and winter, you guys, I am using a body oil or a body butter of some kind that is really extra hydrating for the skin. So then I'm not having that like itchy, dry, yucky winter skin. And then I also wanted to just talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to waking up earlier when it is dark outside. Because obviously in the fall and winter, it's getting darker earlier in the day, and it's dark when the kids are getting on the bus, and then it's practically dark again when they're getting home from school, I swear. And it's harder to wake up in the morning when it is so dark out. And I really would say, if that's like an issue for you, one of the alarm clocks that has a light that like slowly turns on is so helpful. There's the Hatch light. I know that one's more expensive, but there are dupes on Amazon. I've seen them at TJ Maxx and Marshall's and something like that, where the light turns on and like gets brighter and brighter and brighter over time. And that is so helpful with like waking up and getting out of bed. If you haven't read the book, The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins, after I read that book, I wasn't one to hit the snooze button often, but in that book, there's the research and the evidence on how snoozing actually makes you more tired, because when you snooze, you're going in and like you're starting your day with this interrupted sleep pattern, and it is so much better to get to the point where you set the alarm for when you need to get up and you just get up. And I know that can be hard for some. I don't know how or why, but I'm just the type of person where my alarm goes off, I roll over, I turn it off, and I'm going to put my contacts in to wake up. But the Hatch or a light alarm clock is really, really helpful, because it won't just like turn on and be super, super bright. Like you can set it so it gradually turns on, and there's this light that helps you wake up, so you're not going into the snooze cycle. And with it getting darker earlier, maybe you do want to optimize in this season to going to bed earlier. If you're somebody who has been in the habit of going to bed super, super late, one thing you can do is start to train your circadian rhythm to be very much like what the season is now, and it getting darker earlier and going to bed earlier. You are going to be more productive, more energized, and have a more sound mind when you prioritize sleep. So do what you need to do to make that happen. If you feel like you want an episode on that, then stick around, because one may be coming. But if you want me to bump that up to the front, let me know. These are my tips for getting into a fall health and fitness and wellness routine. Thank you so much for listening today, and I will talk to you guys next time. Wow, this was a long one. Thanks for hanging around. This is good. I think there's a lot of pinpoints that you can take away from this episode, maybe some things that you've heard me talk about before that were a refresher. And if something did stand out, please come over to Instagram, send me a DM, and I'd love to chat about what really resonated with you. Talk to you next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you loved what you heard or you want to share your favorite episode topics, please leave a rating and review. This helps the podcast growth and gives people an idea of what the podcast is all about. Something new and exciting that I wanted to share with you before we go is that we now have a Patreon page. This has replaced the Feminine Edge collective community in a cohesive place that is easier for me to manage and cheaper for you. If you are interested in our monthly classes, exclusive day in the life vlogs, Bible studies, community Q&A, and more, go to patreon.com/livingInSync and join for just $5 a month. Check out the show notes for any links or details of things referenced in today's episode, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next one.